Hi, this is Dan Heisman, Philly tutor for Chess FM, and this is the Improve Your Chess series for ICC members. In today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to review a series of books. It's been out for a few years, but it's a relatively recent series. It's called the Move by Move series by Everyman. And in this series, there's two types of books. There's books about a specific grandmaster, like Fischer Move by Move or Spassky Move by Move. And then there's opening books, which usually cover some specific aspect of an opening. So in today's video, we're going to look at the opening book, Anti-Sicilians Move by Cyrus Lakdawala. And the other book is by the same author. That's just coincidence. They use lots of authors. And that's Tal Move by Move. So one from the opening section, one from the Grandmaster section. And what's an anti-Sicilian? Well, before we look at the book, let's explain. White normally plays, I shouldn't say normally, but he used to normally play open Sicilians, where on the second move, White would play knight f3. And then no matter what Black played, let's say d6 or knight c6 or e6 or g6 or something like that, White would play d4. Pawn takes, knight takes, White would get a semi-open d file, Black gets a semi-open c file, and this is called open Sicilians. Well, what's the opposite? Well, you might think it's a closed Sicilian, but in the old days, one of the most popular ways of not playing open Sicilians was to play knight c3, knight c6, g3 and keep the lines closed, so they called that the closed Sicilian. The problem is today there's lots and lots of ways to play against the Sicilian that are not the open Sicilian and not the closed Sicilian. For instance, White could play f4 instead of g3 and have a Grand Prix attack. Or White could play c3, c3 Sicilian or Alpine Sicilian. He could play knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5 with a Rossolimo, or he could play knight f3, d6, bishop e5 check with a Moscow, and so on. And there's other ones that are not open Sicilians or closed Sicilians. So what are we going to call it if it's not an open Sicilian? Well, you can't call it a closed Sicilian because that's just one of the ones. So they came up with the term anti-Sicilians. So that's what this book is. It's a book about anti-Sicilians, and he goes through, if you're playing Black and White plays one of these lines, he has a recommendation for each one. So let's open up to one of his games where he goes through the main line that he wants to play against c3. All right, so I think you have to skip the first game and go right to the second. All right, so let's pick the second game. It goes c3, and he suggests the move knight f6. And now there's no knight to go to c3 to guard the e-pawn, so the e-pawn saves itself by going up and hitting the knight. Knight goes to d5. This is sort of an improved version of the Alekhines defense for Black, because we see that White pawn on e5 and the Black knight on d5, but White has pushed in the move c3 and Black's pushed in the move c5, and that pair of moves has a slight tendency to favor Black a little bit. So you would think that Black would be a little bit better here than he would be in an Alekhines defense. All right, so in this game, White can play either d4 or knight f3. In this game, he played knight f3. And now Black has moves like d6 and knight c6. But in this book, he recommends the line with e6. And now White plays d4. And instead of d4, he asks a question in the book. Now, what's the characteristics of the Move by Move series? Well, there's basically two big characteristics to think of when you're buying these books. And they're fairly advanced books. I would say certainly you want to be about 1,500 to have the book recommended for you. What are the books about? Well, they're fairly detailed in their examination of critical moves. And secondly, the authors use sort of a question and answer or exercise method to get across their key points. So let's do a couple of those. Right here, he says, if the opponent plays bishop to c4, should we fear bishop takes d5? So he's actually talking about the position one move further. So knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, and now White could take the pawn back, or he could play bishop c4. So he's asking if he plays